The palace burned with violence. Do-hyun ran through corridors filled with the sounds of combat, his borrowed weapon heavy in his hands. And everywhere he looked, he saw soldiers fighting soldiers in a civil war that had been building for years. The princess. He gasped to Isolde, who ran beside him. "We have to reach the princess. The queen is in the throne room," Isolde said. "Kethros' forces are moving to capture her. Then you go to the queen." "What? You are a warrior," Do-hyun said. "You can fight your way to her. I cannot. But I can reach Valeth and protect her until this is over." Isolde grabbed his arm and stopped him. "If you go alone, you will die," she said. "Kethros will send his best assassins after the princess. Then I will die protecting her." "You are truly insane." "I am human," Do-hyun said. "Now go save your queen." Isolde hesitated for one heartbeat, and then she was gone, her blade cutting through enemies as she fought toward the throne room. Do-hyun turned and ran the other way. The princess's wing was on the far side of the palace, and the distance seemed to grow with every step. And twice he had to hide as groups of rebel soldiers passed by, their scales marked with the colors of Kethros. He reached Veleth's chambers to find the doors broken and the guards dead. His heart stopped. "Valeth," he shouted. "Valeth, where are you?" A small voice answered from inside a hidden compartment in the wall. "Teacher." She emerged and ran to him, and he caught her in his arms and held her tight. "Are you hurt?" "No," she said. "The guards told me to hide, and I hid." "Good girl." He picked her up and started moving, looking for somewhere safe, somewhere defensible, somewhere they could wait until the fighting ended. He found a small chamber with only one entrance and thick walls, and he set Valeth down behind a heavy piece of furniture. "Stay here," he said. "Do not move no matter what you hear." "Teacher, I am afraid." "I know," he said. "I am afraid too, but I will not let anything happen to you. Promise." "I promise." He turned to face the door, and he waited. He did not wait long. Lord Kethros arrived with 6 soldiers at his back, and when he saw Do-hyun standing alone with a weapon he barely knew how to use, he laughed. "The human protector," Kethros said, his scales blood red and his eyes full of contempt. "I had hoped to save you for last, but you have made this convenient." "Leave," Do-hyun said. "Leave now and I will not kill you." The soldiers laughed, but Kethros did not. "You have courage, human," he said. "Misplaced and foolish, but courage nonetheless. I have something better than courage." "And what is that?" "Someone worth fighting for." Kethros gestured, and his soldiers moved forward. Do-hyun fought. He fought like he had never fought before, using every dirty trick he had learned in a hard life, biting and clawing and screaming. And when his weapon was knocked from his hands, he used his fists. The soldiers were better than him in every way, but they had never faced anything like him. He refused to fall. He took wounds that should have ended him and kept fighting. He felt claws tear through his flesh and kept fighting. He tasted blood in his mouth and kept fighting. 2 soldiers fell to his desperate attacks, and the others pulled back in confusion. "What are you?" one of them asked with fear in his voice. "I am her protector," Do-hyun said through bloody teeth. "And you will not touch her while I breathe." Kethros pushed through his soldiers with murder in his eyes. "Then I will ensure you stop breathing." He was 3 times Do-hyun's size and carried a blade that hummed with energy, and his scales were armored with plates that could stop most weapons. It was not a fair fight, but fair fights were for people who had something to lose. Do-hyun attacked with everything he had left, and Kethros met him with brutal efficiency, and the blade opened wounds across Do-hyun's body that spilled red human blood across the floor. He should have fallen. Any sane creature would have fallen, but Do-hyun looked at the hidden space where Valeth was hiding, and he saw her small face watching with terror and something else, something that looked like faith. He could not fall, he would not fall. Kethra struck again and again, and each time, Do-hyun somehow found the strength to keep standing, to keep moving, to keep fighting. Why will you not die? Kethra screamed. Because she needs me. Do-hyun said. He lunged forward and took the blade through his shoulder, and used that connection to pull himself close enough to grab Kethra's arm and twist with all his remaining strength. The blade fell from the Lord's grip. You cannot defeat me, human. I do not need to defeat you, Do-hyun said. I just need to stop you. He threw himself at Kethra with the last of his energy, and they crashed to the ground together. And Do-hyun held on with arms that had no right to still be working. The doors burst open and Queen Sithara entered with Isolde at her side and a dozen loyal soldiers behind them. She took in the scene with ancient eyes. The dead soldiers and the wounded human and the Lord pinned beneath a creature half his size who simply would not let go. Lord Kethra, she said, her voice cold as void. You are accused of treason against the crown. Kethra tried to speak, but Do-hyun tightened his grip. The human has defeated you in combat, the queen continued. By our own laws, your claims are forfeit, and your life belongs to the crown. She looked at Do-hyun. Royal Protector, do you wish to claim the killing right? Do-hyun thought about it. Thought about all the pain this lord had caused, and all the death he had planned. And then he shook his head. Your law is not mine, he said. Your justice, not mine. He released his grip and rolled away, and finally allowed himself to collapse. Valith ran from her hiding place and threw herself on top of him. Teacher, you cannot die, she said. I forbid it. I will do my best. He managed to say. The queen's healers rushed forward and began their work. And Do-hyun let the darkness take him, knowing that he had kept his promise. He woke 3 days later in the royal medical wing. Valith was asleep in a chair beside his bed, and she looked like she had not left since he had been brought there. The queen stood at the window, looking out over a palace that was slowly being repaired. You should be dead, she said without turning. My healers say your injuries were beyond what any Zinrani could survive. Humans are hard to kill. Clearly, she turned to face him. Kethra has been executed along with his primary conspirators. The others have been given the choice of exile or service. My daughter's throne is secure. Good. You have fulfilled your duty as royal protector, the queen said. Which means I owe you a favor. Do-hyun looked at Valith sleeping beside him and thought about what he wanted. An alliance, he said. A formal treaty between the Zinrani Dominion and humanity, built on mutual respect instead of debt. The queen was silent for a long moment. You could have asked for wealth or power or anything you desired. This is what I desire, Do-hyun said. No more humans looked at as curiosities or threats. No more Zinrani seen as monsters. Just two peoples learning to understand each other. You are a strange creature, Kang Do-hyun. I am human. Yes, the queen said with something like wonder in her voice. You are. She granted his request. A week later, Do-hyun stood on the landing platform where his journey had begun. His body still healing, and his ship waiting with Torvik inside making impatient gestures. Valith clung to his hand and refused to let go. You cannot leave, she said. You are my protector. You do not need me anymore, he said. You have your mother and Isolde and an entire dominion. I want you. Do-hyun knelt so they were eye to eye. I will come back, he said. I promise. Whenever you need me. She threw her arms around his neck and held him so tight he could barely breathe. I love you, teacher. I love you too, little princess. He gently untangled himself and walked toward his ship. And at the door he turned back one last time. The queen stood behind her daughter with one massive hand on the child's shoulder. Thank you, Kang Do-hyun, she called across the distance. You have taught us something valuable. What is that? that the most dangerous thing in the galaxy is not strength or technology or numbers, she said. It is a human with someone to protect. Diane smiled and walked onto his ship. As they lifted off and the jungle world shrank below them, Torvik looked at his friend with all four eyes. You were gone for 2 months, he said. 2 months of me thinking you were dead. I am sorry. You had better be, Torvik said. Now tell me everything. So Diane told him. And somewhere below, a small princess watched his ship disappear into the sky and began counting the days until he would return. Being royal protector came with privileges that Doheen had not expected. He was given access to every part of the palace. Permission to carry weapons, authority to question anyone below the rank of lord. And most importantly, he was given Commander Isolde. She arrived in his chamber the morning after his appointment, and she did not look happy about it. I am Commander Isolde of the 3rd Legion, she said, her amber scales catching the light like polished metal. I have been assigned as your military liaison. I do not need a liaison. I do not care what you need, human, she said. The Queen commands and I obey. That does not mean I have to like it. At least we agree on something. Isolde was everything Doheen was not. A warrior trained from birth in Zivarani combat arts. A soldier who had fought in 3 border wars. And a noble from one of the highest castes who clearly resented being subordinate. To an alien, they hated each other immediately, but hate was useful when channeled properly. I need to investigate the conspiracy against the princess, Doheen said. I need access to records and witnesses in places that a human normally could not go. You believe there is a conspiracy. Someone conditioned an assassin to bypass Stirani senses, Doheen said. That requires resources and knowledge and time. This is not a single actor. Isolde's expression shifted slightly. You are not as stupid as you look. I get that a lot. They started their investigation in the lower levels of the palace where the servants worked. And the lords never visited. Doheen had learned in his previous life that the people who cleaned and cooked and carried things often knew more than anyone expected. And the servants of Kethvara proved no different. Ask them about unusual visitors, Doheen instructed Isolde. Ask about changes in routine or deliveries that did not come through normal channels. They will not speak to me, Isolde said. I am too high caste. Then I will ask. He approached a group of servants who were preparing food and smiled in a way he hoped was friendly. Hello, he said. I am the human everyone is talking about. The servants stared at him with obvious fear. I am not here to cause trouble. He continued. I just want to ask some questions about recent events. One of the servants, an older female with faded green scales, stepped forward. You saved the princess, she said. The little one speaks of nothing else. I did. Then ask your questions, human. We will answer. They answered, and what they told him confirmed his suspicions. Strange deliveries had been arriving for months. Always at night, and always going to the same wing of the palace. And servants who asked questions about them had been reassigned to distant posts without explanation. The wing in question belonged to Lord Kethros. I know that name, Isolde said when they were alone. He is one of the oldest and most powerful lords in the Dominion. His family has opposed the Queen's peace policies for generations. Tell me more about these peace policies. Isolde explained that Queen Sitara had spent decades building alliances with other species and moving the Dominion away from its history of conquest. But not everyone supported this direction. There are those who believe we have grown weak, she said. They want to return to the old ways of expansion and domination, and Kethros leads them. He leads one faction, Isolde admitted. There are others. Doheen thought about what he had learned. If someone wanted to start a war, he said slowly, killing the princess and blaming it on another species would be a good way to do it. Isolde's scales paled. That would be treason of the highest order. That is exactly what this is. They continued their investigation. Do-hyun using methods that no Zithrani would consider, and Isolde grudgingly admitting that his strange human approaches produced results. He bribed servants with promises of royal favor. He befriended guards with stories of human worlds. He played the fool to make enemies underestimate him. And slowly he built a picture of a conspiracy that reached higher than he had imagined. Lord Kethros was indeed at the center, but he was not alone. A dozen lords had joined his cause, and they had been planning for years. They mean to kill the princess and Queen Sithara both, Do-hyun told Isolde one night as they reviewed their findings. They will stage it to look like human assassins and use the resulting outrage to seize power and declare war on humanity. We have to tell the Queen. We cannot. Why not? Because Zithrani honor codes mean she cannot act against lords without formal accusation through the caste courts, Do-hyun said. And I cannot make that accusation because I have no standing. Then what do? We need a Zithrani of sufficient rank to bring the charges, Do-hyun said. Someone willing to risk everything on the word of a human. He looked at Isolde. Someone like you. She recoiled. You asked me to destroy my career, and possibly my life on evidence gathered by an alien. I ask you to save your princes and your queen from traitors. It is not that simple. It is exactly that simple, Do-hyun said. Either you believe me and you act, or you do not believe me and we all wait to die. Isolde was silent for a long time. I saw you fight the assassin. She finally said, You are small and weak and untrained, but you threw yourself at a killer without hesitation. I have fought beside warriors all my life, and I have never seen anything like that. Humans are stubborn. Humans are insane. Same thing sometimes. Isolde laughed, and it was the first time Do-hyun had heard her make that sound. Very well human, she said. I will stand as your voice in the challenge court. I will risk everything because you ask me to. Why? Because the princess trusts you, Isolde said. And because I am beginning to understand why. They made their plans carefully, but they were not careful enough. Do-hyun woke the next morning to find a knife at his throat and a message written on the wall in what looked like blood. The message was simple. Stop or die. They know, he said to Isolde when she arrived. Then we are too late. No, Do-hyun said. We are out of time. There is a difference. That night alarms rang throughout. The palace and soldiers rushed through. The halls with weapons drawn. Lord Kethros had called a gathering of all the great lords, and during that gathering, he had made his move. The coup had begun. 6 weeks passed on Kethvara, and Do-hyun slowly learned the rhythm of palace life. He woke each morning in a chamber larger than his entire ship, and found breakfast waiting for him outside his door. Food that the Zithrani had carefully prepared to match human nutritional needs. And then he would walk to the princess's wing where Valith would be waiting impatiently. She had taken to calling him teacher, even though he insisted he had nothing to teach. Teach me a human game, she demanded one morning. The other children play games, but they never include me because I am the princess. Do-hyun thought for a moment and then sat cross-legged on the floor. Do you? No rock, paper, scissors, he asked. She did not. He spent an hour teaching her the game, and by the end she was laughing with a freedom that seemed to surprise even herself. Again, she said. We have played 50 times. Again. They played again. This became their pattern. Do-hyun sharing small pieces of human culture, and Valith drinking them in like water in a desert. And slowly he found himself caring for this strange little alien in a way he had not expected. He also found himself being watched. The advisor Melax appeared everywhere Do-hyun went. Never speaking but always observing, his pale scales catching the light like something dead. And other courtiers followed Melax's example, treating Do-hyun with cold suspicion whenever Valith was not present. They do not like you. Bailiff said one afternoon as they walked through the palace gardens. I noticed. Malak says you are dangerous, and that Mother is foolish to let you near me. What do you think? Do-hyun asked. Bailiff tilted her head in a gesture he had learned meant she was thinking seriously. I think Melax is a worm who fears anything he does not understand. Do-hyun laughed before he could stop himself. Where did you learn to talk like that? From you, Bailiff said with a grin that showed her small, sharp teeth. The weeks continued, and Do-hyun began to notice things that troubled him. Guards changed shifts at irregular times with no pattern he could follow. Servants moved through parts of the palace they had no reason to visit. Messages were passed in ways that avoided the normal channels. And twice he saw Melax meeting with lords who should have been enemies of each other. He brought his concerns to the queen during one of their weekly meetings. You are observant, she said. More observant than many who have lived here their entire lives. Is that unusual for a human? It is unusual for anyone who is supposedly just a cargo pilot. Do-hyun met her eyes. I had a complicated life before I became a cargo pilot, so I am beginning to understand. She did not ask for details, and he did not offer them. The threat to my daughter is real, the queen said. I feel it growing, but I cannot see its shape. Our enemies have learned to hide from Zidorani's senses. Your senses work differently than mine. Yes, she said. We read pheromones and body heat and 100 other things that your species cannot detect. But we are also blind to things you might see clearly, like lies. Zidorani do not lie the way humans do, the queen said. Our biology makes direct deception difficult. So when someone wishes to deceive, they must find other ways that a human might recognize. Perhaps. She looked at him with something that might have been hope. Would you look? She asked. Would you watch my court with your strange human eyes and tell me what you see? I'm already watching, Do-hyun said. I have been watching since I arrived. And what have you seen? Patterns, he said. Connections that should not exist. People and places they should not be. And always the advisor Melax at the center of it. The queen's scales shifted color in a way Do-hyun had learned to recognize as anger carefully controlled. Melax has served my family for 300 years. That is a long time to grow ambitious. That is a dangerous accusation. I am not accusing anyone, Do-hyun said. I am telling you what I see. The queen was silent for a long moment. Continue watching, she finally said. But be careful, human. If you are right, then you are in as much danger as my daughter. The second assassination attempt came 3 days later. They were in the jungle for a ceremonial hunt. A tradition where the princess was supposed to track and capture a small animal as proof of her connection to the land. And Do-hyun had been reluctantly allowed to accompany her after Bailiff through what could only be described as a royal tantrum. 30 guards surrounded them, and Melax watched from a distance with those cold, pale eyes. This is boring, Bailiff complained. The animal is not even trying to hide. Maybe it knows you are the princess. Plants know I am the princess, she said. Animals do not care. She wandered ahead, and the guards followed. And Do-hyun lagged behind because something felt wrong. He could not say what it was. The jungle was too quiet, or the air tasted strange, or the shadows fell at wrong angles. But something in his human instincts was screaming at him to pay attention. He saw the assassin a heartbeat before anyone else. A figure dropped from the trees directly toward Bailiff. Scales perfectly camouflaged to match the leaves. Blade already swinging down toward the princess, who was looking. The wrong way Do-hyun moved. Without thinking, he crossed the distance in a burst of speed he did not know he had, and slammed into the assassin just as the blade began its descent. And they crashed to the ground together in a tangle of limbs and violence. The assassin was stronger and faster and better trained, but Do-hyun did not care about any of that. He grabbed and punched and bit and screamed and refused to let go even when claws tore across his chest and venom burned in the wounds. Guards rushed in and pulled the assassin away, and Do-hyun collapsed against a tree, bleeding from a dozen places and breathing like he had run 100 miles. Valith was at his side instantly, her small hands pressing against his wounds, her voice high with fear. "Teacher, you are hurt, you are." "I am fine." He lied. The assassin was held by 6 guards, and even captured, she kept trying to reach the princess, her eyes blank and her movements mechanical, like she was a puppet being controlled by invisible strings. "She has been conditioned," one of the guards said with horror. "Her pheromone signature is masked completely. That is impossible," another guard said. "And yet here she is." Melak stepped forward, his face a mask of concern that did not reach his eyes. "Your Highness, we must get you back to the palace immediately. This human saved me," Valith said with ice in her young voice. Again, she looked at Melax with an expression that was pure queen. "Where were you when the assassin attacked Advisor?" Melax's scales flickered. "I was observing from a safe distance as protocol demands." "Protocol?" Valith repeated. "Yes, you do love your protocols." She turned to the captain of the guard. "Take me to my mother immediately and bring Kang Do-hyun with us. He needs our healers. The humans should be—" That was not a request. The captain bowed, and Do-hyun was lifted onto a stretcher and carried back toward the palace. And through his pain, he saw Melax watching them go with something dangerous in his pale eyes. The queen met them in the medical wing, her massive form blocking the doorway like a wall. "Report," she commanded. The captain explained what had happened, and with each word, the queen's scales grew darker with rage. When the captain finished, she turned to Do-hyun, who was being treated by healers who seemed fascinated by human anatomy. "You saved her again." "I just moved," Do-hyun said through gritted teeth as a healer did something painful to his chest. "I did not think about it. That is precisely why I'm going to make you an offer," the queen said. "One that has never been made to an outsider in the history of the Dominion." She knelt beside his bed so they were at eye level. "Become my daughter's royal protector," she said. "Not a consort or a lord or anything that binds you to our politics, but a guardian bound only to her safety, answerable only to the crown." "What does that mean?" "It means you stay at her side until she no longer needs you," the queen said. "It means you gain the authority to protect her by any means necessary. And it means that when your duty is done, you will be owed a favor from me. Anything within my power to grant. Anything. Anything." Do-hyun looked at Valith, who was watching with hope burning in her dark eyes. "Yes," he said. "I will do it." And with those words, Kang Do-hyun stopped being a guest and became something far more dangerous. The Zithrani homeworld was nothing like Do-hyun had imagined. He had expected a harsh world of metal and stone, something that matched the severe soldiers who had brought him here. But Kefara was a jungle planet of impossible beauty where massive trees stretched toward violet skies and buildings grew from the earth like living things. The ship descended through clouds of mist, and Do-hyun pressed his face against the viewing port like a child seeing space for the first time. "It is beautiful," Princess Valith said beside him. "Is it not?" "It is," Do-hyun admitted. The young princess had refused to leave his side during the 3-day journey, sleeping outside his quarters and insisting on eating her meals with him. And the soldiers had grown increasingly frustrated by her attachment to the human who had saved her. Do-hyun had tried to keep his distance, but Valith made that impossible. "My mother will like you," she said with the confidence only a child could have of. "I am certain of it." Do-hyun was not certain of anything, except that he was very far from home and completely out of his depth. The palace rose from the jungle like a mountain of living crystal and wood. its towers reaching so high they disappeared into the clouds. And as the ship approached, Do-hyun could see thousands of Zithrani going about their lives in the structures that surrounded the royal complex. They landed on a platform that jutted from the palace like a great tongue. And when the doors opened, Do-hyun was hit by heat and humidity so intense he struggled to breathe. "You will adapt," one of the soldiers said without sympathy. "Or you will not." Valeth took his hand and led him forward, and Do-hyun let himself be guided because he had no idea where else to go. The interior of the palace was cooler and filled with a green light that filtered through walls made of some translucent material. And everywhere Do-hyun looked, he saw a Zithrani of different sizes and colors, all of them stopping to stare at the human in their midst. "They have never seen a human before," Valeth explained. "You are a curiosity. Wonderful," Do-hyun muttered. They walked for what felt like hours through corridors that twisted and turned in ways that made no sense to human logic. And finally they arrived at a chamber so vast that Do-hyun could not see its ceiling. At the far end sat a throne of living wood. And upon that throne sat Queen Sithara. She was enormous, easily 3 times the size of her daughter. And her scales were deep purple, shot through with veins of gold that pulsed with a light of their own. And when her black eyes fixed on Do-hyun, he felt the weight of centuries pressing down on him. "So," she said, and her voice echoed through the chamber like distant thunder. "This is the human who touched my daughter." Do-hyun opened his mouth to speak, but one of the soldiers grabbed his arm. "You do not speak until the Queen permits it," the soldier hissed. The Queen rose from her throne and descended the steps toward them with a grace that seemed impossible for something so large. And she stopped directly in front of Do-hyun and looked down at him with an expression he could not read. "You are smaller than I expected," she said. Do-hyun said nothing because he had not been given permission to speak. The Queen made a sound that might have been approval. "You learn quickly. That is good. You may speak freely, human. My name is Kang Do-hyun," he said. "I did not mean to cause any problems. I heard a child screaming and I helped her. That is all. That is all," the Queen repeated. "You ran into a burning station. You lifted rubble with your bare hands. You carried a stranger through fire while your own body was being destroyed. And you call this nothing. I call it being human." Do-hyun said. Something shifted in the Queen's expression. "The Zithrani have codes that have governed us for 10,000 years, she said. "When someone saves a royal life, the debt is absolute. It cannot be dismissed with words or ignored out of convenience." "What does that mean for me?" Do-hyun asked. "It means I must offer you payment equal to my daughter's life," the Queen said. "You may become a royal consort with all the privileges and responsibilities that entails. You may claim territory within the Dominion to rule as your own. You may demand the death of any enemy, and I will grant it. You may take titles that will make you equal to our highest lords." Each option sounded worse than the last. "What if I want none of those things?" Do-hyun said. "What if I just want to go home?" The Queen's eyes narrowed. "Home? I have a ship," Do-hyun said. "I have a co-pilot who is probably worried sick about me. I have a life that I would like to return to." The silence in the throne room was absolute. Valeth stepped forward, her small voice carrying in the quiet, "Mother, he cannot leave. He saved me." "I understand, child," the Queen said. But her eyes never left Do-hyun. "Human, do you understand what you are doing? Refusal of the debt is refusal of our honor. Our honor is everything we are. I do not mean to insult anyone," Do-hyun said carefully. "But I did not save your daughter for payment. I saved her because she needed help. That should be the end of it." An advisor stepped forward, his scales pale and his expression hostile. "Your Majesty, this human spits on our traditions. This is grounds for—" "Silence, Malax," the Queen said, and the advisor went immediately quiet. The human is not wrong even if he's not right. She returned to her throne and sat, her massive tail curling around the base. There's a clause in the old laws, she said. When a debt cannot be settled through traditional means, the crown may invoke hospitality until a mutual solution is found. What does that mean? Do-hyun asked. It means you will remain here as my guest, the queen said. You will not be a prisoner, but you will not leave. Not until we find a way to resolve this that satisfies both our honor and your strange human sensibilities. For how long? For as long as it takes. Do-hyun felt trapped in a way he had never experienced before. Furthermore, the queen continued, My daughter has become attached to you. She has not stopped speaking of her brave humans since the moment she was rescued. You will serve as her companion and guardian during your stay. Valith made a sound of pure joy and ran to Do-hyun, wrapping her arms around his leg. You see, she said, I told you my mother was wise. Do-hyun looked down at the small princess, who had turned his entire life upside down, and he felt something complicated move through his chest. I am not qualified to guard anyone, he said. I am just a cargo pilot. You ran into fire for a stranger, the queen said. That qualifies you more than any training ever could. The advisor Melak stepped forward again, his face twisted with barely hidden contempt. Your Majesty, surely you cannot mean to trust a royal child to this alien. I can and I do, the queen said. You are dismissed, Melak. All of you are dismissed. I wish to speak with the human alone. The courtiers and soldiers filed out, Melak shooting Do-hyun a look of pure hatred as he left. And soon only Do-hyun and Valith remained with the queen. Leave us, child, the queen said gently. But mother, go. Valith looked up at Do-hyun with worry in her eyes. It will be fine, he said. I will see you soon. The princess nodded and ran from the chamber, leaving Do-hyun alone with the most powerful being on this world. The queen leaned forward on her throne. Now, human, she said, let us speak honestly. I thought we were speaking honestly. That was politics, the queen said. This is real. Someone is trying to kill my daughter, and I need to know if that someone is you. Do-hyun felt cold shock run through him. I saved her life. Yes, the queen said. And what better way to gain access to her than to stage a rescue? What better way to earn trust than to play the hero? That is insane. Is it? The queen's eyes bore into him. The attack on the station killed 12 of my best guards. Guards who have protected my family for decades. It killed diplomats and servants and innocent bystanders. And yet somehow my daughter survived because a random human decided to run into the fire. Sometimes good luck happens. I do not believe in luck, the queen said. I believe in plots and plans and schemes that span years. I believe someone wants my daughter dead, and I do not yet know who. She rose and walked to a window that looked out over the endless jungle. But I also believe I saw something real when my daughter looked at you, she said. Children are difficult to fool, especially Zithrani children. She trusts you, and that is either a gift or a weapon. It is a gift, Do-hyun said. I would never hurt her. We will see, the queen said. I am placing you at her side, human, because I want you close. If you are a friend, then you will protect her better than any guard. If you are an enemy, then I want you where I can watch you. She turned back to face him. Either way, you will not be leaving anytime soon. Do-hyun understood then that he was not a guest at all. He was bait in a trap he did not understand. Kang Do-hyun had seen many strange things in his 12 years as a freight pilot, but he had never seen a space station tear itself apart. The explosion came without warning, and it threw him against the corridor wall, hard enough to crack something in his shoulder. And for a moment, all he could do was lie there and watch the emergency lights paint everything red around him. Dozens of aliens ran in every direction, their screams mixing into a sound that hurt his ears. And Do-hyun forced himself to stand, even though his body wanted nothing more than to stay down. Nexus Prime was supposed to be safe. And that was what everyone always said about the neutral trading station. And Do-hyun had believed it right up until the moment the diplomatic wing exploded. His co-pilot, Torvik, grabbed his arm with two of his four hands and pulled him toward their ship. "We need to leave now," Torvik said, his gray face tight with fear. "The hull is breaching in multiple sections, and this whole station could collapse." Do-hyun nodded and started to follow. But then he heard something that made him stop. A child was screaming somewhere in the smoke ahead. "Did you hear that?" Do-hyun asked. "I heard nothing important," Torvik said. "What I hear is the sound of a station dying, and I want to be far away when it does." The scream came again, high and desperate, and Do-hyun pulled his arm free from his friend. "Go start the ship," he said. "I will catch up." Torvik made a sound of frustration that needed no translation. "You humans are insane," he said. "You know that, right? Just go," Do-hyun said. And then he was running toward the smoke and the fire and the screaming child. The diplomatic wing was chaos, and Do-hyun had to climb over broken walls and dodge falling debris. And twice he almost turned back because the heat was too much. But the screaming kept pulling him forward. He found the source in what had once been some kind of waiting chamber. A young alien lay trapped under a metal beam, her scales glittering purple and gold in the emergency lights. And around her lay the bodies of 4 adults of the same species, their ceremonial armor crushed and broken. The child saw him, and her screaming stopped, replaced by a look of pure terror. "I am not going to hurt you," Do-hyun said, though he doubted she could understand him. "I am here to help." He grabbed the beam and pulled, but it was too heavy, and his injured shoulder screamed in protest. So he looked around until he found a broken piece of pipe that could work as a lever. The child watched him with huge black eyes that reflected the flames growing. Behind him, Do-hyun wedged the pipe under the beam and pushed down with everything he had. And slowly the beam lifted just enough. "Come on," he said, gesturing with his head. "Move." The child seemed to understand because she dragged herself forward. And the moment she was clear, Do-hyun let the beam crash back down. The ceiling groaned above them in a very concerning way. Do-hyun knelt and looked at the child, who was small enough that he could carry her. And he opened his arms to show he meant no harm. "We have to go," he said. "Can I carry you?" The child hesitated for only a moment before she reached for him. And Do-hyun scooped her up and started running. The station was dying around them, and Do-hyun could feel it in the way the floor shook and the walls buckled. And he ran faster than he had ever run in his life, the child clinging to his neck so hard he could barely breathe. A support beam fell, and Do-hyun threw himself to the side, shielding the child with his body. And the fire kissed his back and left a pain that made him cry out. But he kept moving because stopping meant dying. The child made small sounds against his chest. Not words exactly, but something that might have been comfort or gratitude. And Do-hyun held her tighter and promised silently that he would get her out of this. He burst through a doorway into a section that was still stable. And there ahead, he saw the beautiful sight of emergency response teams setting up barriers. A medic rushed toward him and tried to take the child. But the small alien refused to let go of Do-hyun, her claws digging into his flight suit. "It is okay," Do-hyun said to her, his voice rough from the smoke. "You are safe now. These people will help you." The child looked at him with those huge dark eyes and slowly released her grip, allowing the medic to take her. Do-hyun collapsed to his knees, his burned back and broken shoulder finally demanding their due. And he was vaguely aware of someone treating his wounds as the world went gray around the edges. When he woke up, he was in a medical bay surrounded by soldiers. They were not human soldiers, and they were not any species he recognized. And they stood in perfect formation with weapons that looked very capable of ending his life. Do-hyun sat up slowly, his body screaming in protest. "What is happening?" he asked. "Did I do something wrong?" One of the soldiers stepped forward. Her scales the same purple and gold as the child he had saved. And when she spoke, her voice was cold. "You touched the princess of the Zithrani Dominion," she said. "You put your hands upon royal blood." Do-hyun felt ice form in his stomach. "I was trying to save her," he said. "She was trapped, and the station was collapsing." "We are aware," the soldier said. "That is the only reason you still breathe." The doors to the medical bay opened and more soldiers entered, flanking someone who was clearly important. And Do-hyun recognized the child immediately. She had been cleaned and dressed in robes that looked like they cost more than his ship. And she stood with a dignity that seemed impossible for someone so young. The moment she saw Do-hyun, her serious expression cracked into something that looked like joy. "That is him," she said, pointing. "That is the human who saved me." An older soldier leaned down to speak to her. "Your Highness, we should not." "He carried me through fire," the child said, cutting him off with surprising authority. "He was burned protecting me. I saw it happen." The soldiers exchanged looks that Do-hyun could not read. The child walked toward him, ignoring the protests of her guards. And she stopped right in front of his bed and looked up at him with those huge black eyes. "What is your name?" she asked in careful but clear common tongue. "Kang Do-hyun," he said. "I am Princess Volith of the Zithrani Dominion," she said. "You saved my life, Kang Do-hyun, and I will not forget." Do-hyun did not know what to say to that. The older soldier stepped forward, his face grave. "Human Kang Do-hyun, you have created a complication that spans light years. Under Zithrani law, the saving of royal blood creates a debt that cannot be ignored, a debt that must be paid by the crown itself." Do-hyun felt the ice in his stomach spread. "I do not want any payment," he said. "I just want to go back to my ship and my life." The soldier shook his head slowly. "What you want is no longer relevant. Queen Sithara has been informed of your actions. She commands your presence on our homeworld. And if I refuse," the soldier's eyes were not unkind, but they were firm. "You do not refuse the queen." Princess Valith reached out and touched his hand, her small claws gentle against his skin. "Do not be afraid," she said. "My mother is wise and fair. She will honor you as you deserve." Do-hyun looked at this small alien child who had somehow turned his simple cargo run into an interstellar incident. And he wondered how exactly his life had gone so wrong so quickly. "When do we leave?" he asked. "Now," the soldier said, and just like that, Kang Do-hyun's old life ended and something new and terrifying began.